it's just so rapidly changing, and the speed of life is rapidly changing, that it can seem to a lot of people there's even less time than ever before to essentially put health into play. And when sustaining income and securing financial security for themselves and their family and their employees becomes more and more important than looking after themselves as we're going into this year and next year. So the first thing I would say is that I have noticed it drastically change, and then therefore how professionals view their own health has also changed dramatically over the last 18 months, and not in a good way.
And that sounds really ironic, doesn't it? Because there was that big talk during lockdown, and just coming out of lockdown, that
mindfulness and meditation, and walks, and all the things that everybody enjoyed and loved. They are now, unfortunately, a bit of a distant memory for a lot of professionals.
Welcome to Real People, Real Results, Real Change, the podcast that's dedicated to helping real people develop real health and fitness in their lives. Real people like you, business owners, professionals, house husbands and housewives, and students. I'm Stefan, I'm a personal wellness coach at Ufit Studio, and I'll be your host. This episode, I'm talking with Helen Gribble, head coach of Ufit Studio in Leicester in the UK. Helen is an experienced coach who talks with me in this episode about how busy professionals can find the time and energy to focus on their health and fitness. Okay, Helen, I'm so privileged to be talking to you today. Obviously, you're head coach at Ufit Studio in Leicester in the UK.
Yes.
You're an experienced personal trainer, and not just looking at the physical side, but also mindset, nutrition, sort of the whole caboodle, really.
The whole package.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what I wanted to chat with you today was, so many of our listeners are busy working professionals, business owners. To be honest, most people these days, they're juggling multiple things, sometimes multiple jobs, right? It's life's complicated. And one of the frequent questions I get asked, and I'm sure you do too, is how do you do this? Like in our busy lives, how on earth do you fit health and fitness in a meaningful way into your life, like in terms of the whole thing? Like,
I think one of the things I've certainly noticed over the last few years is that there's a massive change in how people have actually been working since lockdown. It's quite fascinating to actually work with that many people as we do, and actually be able to see trends and behaviours, and then be able to compare that to kind of pre-lockdown, during lockdown. And when it comes to professionals or business owners in particular, like there's a massive change in, well, with the climate and everything else. So busy pre-lockdown, post-lockdown, and now this year is a whole different ball game.
Okay.
So one of the first things to probably comment on is that it's just so rapidly changing, and the speed of life is rapidly changing, that it can seem to a lot of people there's even less time than ever before to essentially put health into play. And when sustaining income and securing financial security for themselves and their family and their employees becomes more and more important than looking after themselves as we're going into this year and next year. So the first thing I would say is that I have noticed it drastically change, and then therefore how professionals view their own health has also changed dramatically over the last 18 months, and not in a good way.
And that sounds really ironic, doesn't it? Because there was that big talk during lockdown, and just coming out of lockdown, that
mindfulness and meditation, and walks, and all the things that everybody enjoyed and loved. They are now, unfortunately, a bit of a distant memory for a lot of professionals. And I suppose when we use that term, it's always good to differentiate between probably business owners and employees.
Yes.
Business owners probably feel that more drastically than ever before. But kind of employees in upper level jobs are still feeling the pressure.
Yes.
And yes, the irony of, but then that the dramatic shift between how people view their health from lockdown and now is like complete opposite.
Right.
For those people more than ever, I think.
Yeah.
Which is challenging.
Yeah. And probably brings it it's probably there in people's minds, but with that question mark of just, how? Where do I, how do I start? How on earth is that going to work?
Yeah, and actually, how is a very important question to ask. And if I do have the pleasure to work with somebody who asks those questions in those ways, and I'm on pretty much 70 to 80% of there already, I think the first thing is when we start those kind of conversations about how do we get you into a space where you start to look after yourself, and what does that look like? For example, it always actually ironically starts with, I know you mentioned it, like, well, in lockdown I was doing X, Y, Z, and half of the battle I think for a lot of people with busy lifestyles now is actually the first step is being able to help them understand what is actually realistic as opposed to what they would like to be realistic or would want to be realistic in a previous time in their life.
Yes.
And that's a big one.
Yes.
So first step, I think, even before we get into how, is just understanding like what is realistic for you in reality. If you really get down to it, we could talk about best case scenario all day long, and I'd love to. It might just be a Disney story we're creating though, and it always starts, a Disney film always starts with that really traumatic moment, right, when it doesn't work or something goes wrong. And that's where when you're dealing with any client, regardless, I think, but so many people like that, it's just like, okay, but what is actually realistic with what you're trying to manage and what you're trying to deal with? What can you actually do before we start thinking about the house?
So in a certain sense, lockdown for some people almost created like kind of a nostalgia in a certain sense.
Oh, hell yeah. It's like the same nostalgia as you'd meet a professional who's maybe in their 40s and was also training in their 20s. Like they still have a nostalgia for being able to lift, 150 kg and bench the world. And they're coming in at 40, managing a business and 150 employees and sleeping 2 hours a night. And they're still, I could do 150 and I could train 4 times a week. And that is always the case, I think, with somebody. Let's face it, if you are in that position, if you're in the fantastic position to own a business, regardless of climate, it means that you know how to work hard.
Yeah.
It means that you know how to be driven, you know how to be focused. And if there was a previous time in your life where ever to take all that drive with more free time, but you had bigger business and more responsibilities, 10 to the dozen, they would have been fantastic at training and would have really looked after their health, and they would have been in some point in great condition. And unfortunately now when they're coming back into it, either post-lockdown or later on in life, we're dealing with that. Yeah. You're right, nostalgia of, but I could do this. What can you do now?
And there's so many reasons, right, to look after our health and fitness that expand out into other aspects of our life, right? Not just thinking about, as we're aging and maintaining that health, into, sort of middle age and beyond, but also just in terms of like our energy and our ability to keep going, manage the stresses, especially when difficult times hit. So we know that, right?
Yes, we know that.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Right. And I think people have, people know that is something they should probably be thinking about. They maybe not, kind of, it's a bit like dipping your toe in the water. It's like, I'm not going to put the whole foot in and see how cold it really is, but I'm and I know I probably should be walking in that
I don't know though. I'm honest with you. Okay. I think I probably. Well, from experience I've been dealing with clients, not always, no. I think part of the battle is understanding what you can do now, and also why are you doing it? Yeah. Like you and I know that. If I'm speaking to, I don't know, a male client in his 50s who at 30 was in peak performance, was running marathons, lifting loads of weight, and that's what he wants to start his journey doing. Yes. Even though he's working a 70-hour week now, hasn't run in 3 years, is completely out of fitness, running multiple businesses, and yet wants to recapture the ability of something he could do 20 years ago. Yes. It's that point where you have to the question of why you're actually doing it. Okay. And actually challenging that individual to in reality, how much can we do? And as my role with any client is to actually work out what's going to drive them forward, what's going to keep them healthier for longer. If I can help a client see that or think in a different way slightly when it comes to being a busy specifically professional person, if you start to look after yourself in a different way, you can look after your business for longer and you're able to be more efficient, more effective. You could probably make more money if you actually take some time being the point, not as much time as you probably would like or would want, but how much is realistic, and then what can you do in terms of your health that allows you to run your business for longer and create more money for longer and look after your employees for longer. So there's something right at the start about expectations anyway. Yes, there is. In reality, everyone, I think, generally, this is just about all people. I think everyone wants to look and feel good. Like what that then, that's a very simple statement. What that translates as, and for the reasons why they want to look good or feel good, that's like an infinite things underneath there, like an ocean of reasons that might change with the tide and be more important than others at any given time. At the surface level, everyone wants to look and feel good.
Yeah.
What does that mean, though? That could be so many other things, and for a professional, that is usually quite specific.
Right. But I guess what I'm picking up on what you're saying is that what's really important is that, you know, as much as like people will say, like, you know, big goals are great, you know, get you out of bed, get you motivated. Actually, what's important is to figure out what you can do and start there. I guess because starting is better than not starting, but also you don't want to get into that cycle of you set an expectation, you can't hit it, and then you give up, and then you're back.
Yes,
on that
and then work takes over again. What holds more value to somebody in that position when time is of the essence, and they're not getting a perceived result because they've not set an expectation? Well, they're going to value the meeting over training. They're gonna value their work life that they're more adapted to than anything else. I think it's one of the important things that we do is that we definitely look at health markers.
Okay.
So we're not just looking at someone's overall goals as such, that we look at those health markers when we start working with somebody, because it's really important to gain the bigger picture with that entire client. Because the client might walk through a door thinking, I only need to use a couple of pounds, I'm good.
Right.
And then we start talking about, okay, what's your resting heart rate? What's your blood pressure like? And then suddenly we're opening up a whole other avenue of reasons that client might need to be looking after their health that they didn't even know about, because they haven't given the time to really investigate themselves, or they just, let's be honest, most of those people in bracket, I'm going to be honest, sweeping statement, probably don't have a time to have a health check with a GP. Like they're not in that kind of, there's don't get me wrong, there's a really, really small percentage might have it in the landscape. It's rare. If they're coming to us for help, it's really unlikely that they've actually explored what those are.
So unless
to
there's
know.
Like a specific health scare and that's a particular interest of theirs.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Then they have no idea. So sometimes you can channel the reasons for why and how we can do this by purely just gathering information and letting that person know, well, this is your whole health picture. You've been working to build this business for 20, 30 years. It's really successful, and that's great. The cost has been, though, your health and your time, and here's where we are right now today. So then let's go into the how are we gonna move these markers forward? How are we going to improve your health overall? How are we going to make you look and feel better? And how can we tie that all into one approach that is maintainable and consistent for you, taking into account your entire working life?
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's funny actually, because I was thinking the other day about just getting like another sort of complete blood test and just seeing where I'm at, because if you don't look at those things at some point, and it doesn't have to be as complicated as that, right? It can just be like you say, like your resting heart rate or your blood pressure or something like that. But unless you
it's fascinating. Get it done. I had it done. Get it done.
And it's being sort of just ahead of the curve, because it is why. Right, isn't it? And the worst thing is to leave that to a situation where you're just caught in your health catches up with you. That's when you find out, and then you're on the back foot, and it's a great motivator for some people, but it's a lot harder work as well at that point, I guess.
It's a lot harder work. I mean, even if I think of my journey, I mean, I really didn't start looking after my health until kind of my mid-30s. And the reasons why I used to lift weight and do things then was to just be as strong as physically possible and lift the heavy, be the woman in the gym that lifts the heaviest weight and all the rest of it, and have this whole ego around and everything. And I absolutely loved it. And there's still part of me, I'm speaking from my own personal mindset as well, there's still part of me that wants to recapture that, coming on to 43 next month. Now, I do know it's not impossible, don't get me wrong, but I'm also balancing a lot more in life than I was back then. So the reality is that it's just finding the thing that makes you look and feel good in your head and allows you to keep going. And I check my health markers. I had my blood done last year. I do my blood pressure regularly for a week, 2-week gaps, and then leave it a few months, check it, see where it's at, check my resting heart rate and everything. And there's always work to do. And that's me being 100% honest. And that's because I'm getting to the point in life where it's really important that I can keep going and be as healthy as I can be. And I might not be able to lift as heavy as I used to. so much like to think I can. I can't.
Yeah.
I am, however, though, making sure I'm looking at my health in different perspectives slightly. And I've just been very lucky to have the access and support to be able to do that at this point in life.
Yeah.
And part of that is, for me, with any people in all walks of life, is just starting to help them look at that and understand what it is for them that's going to give them that sense of looking after their health.
Yeah, yeah. So what I mean, I know this, like, there's probably 100 different things, but like if you could just kind of cherry pick 2 or 3 things that someone, as a starting point, who's maybe not thought about it before, they're listening today, they're thinking, you know, it has been something maybe that's been on the back of my mind. I know I need to start somewhere. Life doesn't get any easier.
No.
Right? Like time doesn't suddenly become available generally. If anything, it's the opposite. There's more things fighting for your time and your energy. What are good starting points for people? Would you say? Like, actually, is it around fitness or is it something else? Is it more? Is it food? Right? Or is it, you know? Is it just getting out and walking more? Like,
I don't think habitually it's anything that. With meeting people at the start of their journey, it's really, really rare that someone's been triggered by a food situation or they've started something that's been consistent. It's usually the complete opposite. They have usually, with professionals of a certain age bracket, we'll say, you may have young professionals who have more time and therefore are probably more influenced by their peers, etc. So they might see somebody they want to look like and they might come through the door. So they might see that, or there might be somebody in a different point in life who might have had a health scare. You've talked about it earlier. Yeah. I think what you see universally against all those, if somebody has it in their head, if you have it in your head and you're thinking about it, and you've been thinking about it for more than a month, then you probably just need to do something about it. So you need to actually take an action. So the first step is actually taking action. Okay. So that could be anything from things we've discussed, like actually just finding out. Like, most people are scared to find out what the health markers are. So most people are scared to find out what the bloods are. Like, they know, like you mentioned it before, like, you know, they should, being an operative word, we tell you something, you should be doing this. Then do it. Yeah. Do it, take the first step and do something to find out where you really are. And often, frankly, if someone gets scared into it enough to realise they have to do something because they have people relying on them, specifically if they're professional, then 10 to the dozen, if they're driven, they will actually take an action and do something. That's the first step, is actually, if you're thinking about it, do something. Okay. Start researching your local gym, start like the small things, like just gathering information to give yourself the bigger picture. Yeah. Like, if you're not coming to someone who's going to do that for you, then do it for yourself and then find out exactly where you stand and exactly how urgent is it that you need to do something, right? If you're talking about somebody who's in their 50s or 60s or like more towards like the 60s, then even more imperative, like actually find out where your health markers are and then like choose how you're going to approach it. Definitely first step is just know where you are from a health perspective, firstly. Secondly, again, knowledge is only as powerful as you use it. So if you have that information, choose then your next step to do something with it. So it might be, if it is something like to do with where your overall weight is, then perhaps it is something to do with food. If it's to do with where your overall cardio is or your blood pressure, etc., then start to look at ways you can look at either sport groups or support through a PT or something that's going to help you gain a structure of how you can start exercise and link in food. I suppose those kind of the two things. But really, it's just taking action. If you're thinking about it and you're listening to something like this and you're already like, you're ready on the brink, aren't you, really? If you're on the precipice, then just step over and do something about it. Yeah, just push. I know it sounds simple when I say it like that. I'll just do it.
Absolutely, push that button and just do something.
Just push the button. It's not even pushing the button though, Stefan. I think it's just knowing. It's just stepping through the fear of I'm too busy to find out what's going on with my health, and it's not, my health isn't important. Yeah. And actually just challenging yourself. So first step is challenge yourself. Find out what's going on. Yeah. Because it's easy to hide from it otherwise with another meeting or another deal or...
Yeah, and that's endless, right? So.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So those are probably... I wouldn't say it's any more complex than that.
Okay, perfect. All right, that's been so helpful. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, cheers.